Horowitz, you just had 3 months time to change the fair, which was much criticized for its past editions. What were you able to change?
Sure. Well, a lot of the parts of the fair, from a major structural vantage, were set in play before I arrived. After last year's fair, there was a very conscious decision to scale down the size of the Armory Show and the trend towards a more boutique model. So that was something that was put in play last spring before I arrived. We have 25% less exhibitors on Pier 94 this year. We engaged in architectural practice for the first time called Bade Stegeberg and Cox. So they worked with us extensively from the summer up through now to do a refit of the architecture of the piers to make it breathe easier, to make the navigation and circulation of visitors much easier, and to make more social spaces like the VIP lounge where we're sitting in much more suitable to the audiences that we get. The VIP lounge this year, to take one concrete example, is 2.5 times the size of what it had been, and we've inserted a lot of different cafes and social spaces. When I was brought in the fall, one of the objectives was really to reach out to and re-engage a great group of exhibitors, some of whom hadn't done the Armory for many years. Others had dropped out more recently, and we were able to bring on a really fantastic group of exhibitors alongside a core group of key exhibitors, Listen, Victoria Miro, Sean Kelly, Marion Boski, and others who had been very supportive of the fair for years. David Zwerner, for example, has returned this year. We were very proud to have won him back over to the fair. He came on with a phenomenal project by Michael Riedel, who's a younger German artist based in Frankfurt. Sprutmagers, we went to visit in November. And we were able to convince them to come back and message the very key structural changes that we had made to the fair, and they've joined, for example, for the first time since 2000. So certainly a lot of the impact that I had very concretely was really just getting out and speaking some of these structural changes to our community of exhibitors, and then working with our cultural partners and other constituents here in the city to give the fair the energy and the gravitas that I think we've achieved this week.
Are you 100% happy with the result?
We're thrilled with the result so far. It's been a really, really successful fair to date. Wednesday, which is the VIP Vernissage, was a huge amount of energy. We saw a lot of international collectors as well as a core group of key American collectors coming to the fair. The pace of sales was brisk and very upbeat. But more than that, I think the exhibitors' comment upon was the fact that the changes that we had made were very palpable and very noticeable. Wider aisles, a more generous entry area, a proper champagne bar, all these types of things I think the exhibitors really commented upon, and they felt remarkably different because of that. Bear in mind that we have 50 less galleries on this pier this year than we had last year, and that difference was palpable from day one. So people felt better in the space, the collectors reacted to that, and the sales were very strong, so we've been really happy about that.
What do you want to change for the next editions? In which direction will it be?
Well, I think that certainly keeping to the more boutique model is important. We've seen a lot of other fairs, and certainly from my vantage, not only as a director or managing director of the fair, but also as an academic in the field, is that the art fair landscape has changed noticeably over the last 15, 20 years since the Armory was originally founded as a Gramercy International in the mid-90s. It's a much more competitive landscape, it's a much more global landscape, and the landscape has gotten larger and larger and larger. The Armory Show itself expanded massively. It was 275 galleries or so last year, and we wanted to scale that back. So I think the one thing that we'll definitely be keeping for the foreseeable future is a more boutique and manageable size, which I think is one of the main reasons that people have reacted so positively to this year's fair. But no fair, of course, is perfect. Each fair needs to be addressed each year, and I think that we'll look at in the wake of this year's fair what we liked and what we think could use a little fine-tuning and go with that. I think one thing that's been very positive this year is these very focused booths. I think our galleries stepped it up a level. They brought very highly focused presentations. We have a lot of single artist shows on view, starting with Michael Riedel up front at David Zwerner. 3 great galleries have presented work by Bjarne Melgaard, Guido Baudak in Berlin, Ursula Krinzinger in Vienna, and Carol Green here in New York. So that's a really special project for us. We introduced a solo project section this year for some of our younger galleries that I think has been really successful. So I think moving forward at the content level, we will continue to push the envelope of what the galleries are bringing. And it also gets back to this more principled question of what an art fair today means, not only in 2012, but in New York in particular. It's a very educated, very professional audience here. And I think a fair like this can speak very well to an audience like that through delivering a very specific project-based program, which is a little bit different than what you might see at Basel or some of the other international fairs out there.
Frieze New York Fair in May already draws a lot of attention and will change the situation in New York. How do you react to that?
I mean, I think we've reacted to it simply by playing to our strengths. Each fair, any business really goes in ebbs and flows and cycles, and I think that there was a certain amount of criticism out there going into this year's edition about the Armory, growing too unlarge, being too disengaged with its constituents, whether they're exhibitors or collectors. And we addressed Frieze, or not Frieze in particular, but I'd say art fairs in a broader sense, by playing to our strengths and really becoming a more solid business. A more focused fair and scaling it down. And I think what we've done is really just focus on what we can control ourselves and deliver a very quality fair experience for our exhibitors here, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Do you think New York is big enough for 2 contemporary art fairs?
I don't know if it's big enough for 2 contemporary art fairs, but it's the biggest contemporary market in the world. As much as the art world is globalized, New York is very much the center of the international market. I think we still continue to see that when we look at statistics of where buyers are coming from. And I think New York is an extremely rich market that can sustain a lot. And I think the future will tell if it can sustain multiple major contemporary art fairs.
You come from the VIP art fair, which is an exclusively online art fair. Now you cooperate with Pedal 8, which mirrors the Armory Show in the internet.
Yeah.
Will this be the model of the future? Or can Armory, in this sense, be a model for the future art fair?
Well, I think as a manager of a fair, you have a directive and a mandate to increase the visibility of your exhibitors as much as possible. And for nothing else, Pedal 8 achieves that. They have a very sophisticated platform. It's visually well presented, and it allows our exhibitors that wish to participate to expand their life outside of the bricks and mortar parameters of our fair and the piers here in Manhattan. Pedal 8 came to us with a really strong proposal to put our fair online, to give our galleries an extra leg before the fair and for a week after the fair. So it runs for approximately 3 weeks. And it allows our exhibitors to reach a collector base that can't, for one reason or another, travel to the fair. I think one thing that we all have to be is pragmatists. There are simply too many fairs this year for every serious collector and less serious collectors to be able to travel to every fair. And I think the internet provides that. I think as people become more and more comfortable with what the internet is as a medium, that it's a very, very powerful tool. I think one thing that I learned certainly from VIP is that it's not just about sales outright, but it's about introductions and it's about access. And it's about knowledge and education and research. And I think one thing that we saw very profoundly with VIP Art Fair last year is that whether or not sales took place during the course of the week in late January, introductions were made and new sales were made in person at other events throughout the year. And if we can generate some knock-on business that perhaps comes through Pedal 8 during the week itself, or in the aftermath, and that can be associated to a gallery's participation at the Armory Show, I think that it makes for a very, very attractive and long-standing collaboration. And I think art fairs, along with exhibitions at museums and the gallery level, will go towards the internet in a much more proactive fashion, inevitably moving forward.
The number of art fairs worldwide is ever growing for the last couple of years, with new hotspots popping up every 6 months around the globe, while the art markets, marketplaces become ever more local. Do you think that the art fair, as we know it, has a future?
Yeah, I think it does have a future, and I think that the future is very much particular to the different markets that are at stake. I mean, I don't really enjoy speaking in generalizations too much. I think an art fair in New York is very different than an art fair in Mumbai or Sao Paulo or London or Basel or Hong Kong. Speaking from the vantage of where we are in New York, I think what we've seen, certainly in the history of the Armory Show, but this year in particular, is that it's a very rich marketplace. And I think that all these different markets serve a very specific function. I think a gallery that goes to a smaller regional market bringing Western contemporary art may or may not do well. We don't really know that yet. Some of the galleries I know that have done that in some of the other fairs have had mixed success. But I think it's also about being there and engaging with that audience for multiple years. One thing that we've certainly addressed this year with the Armory, to speak to some of the changes we put in place, was looking at the geographical dispersion of our galleries and really trying to build a further strengthened footing in some of these other developing markets. And we're very proud of that this year. We have galleries from 30 different countries, galleries like Singapore Tyler, who are exhibiting here for the first time, Polygrafa in Barcelona, it's the first time they do our fair. They've been in Basel for many years. Hyundai in Korea is a very important player in that region. They show work here by Liu Fan and Ai Weiwei, Namjoon Paik. So it's really nice, and I think that the dialogue is local and global at the same time, and I think that a fair like ours can actually, in a roundabout way, continue to benefit as a market in Asia or South America develops, because you get more educated collectors, more committed collectors, and they in turn travel the globe more. And I think in some way it can really raise the playing field for everybody simultaneously.